When thinking of The Princess Bride, one word probably comes to mind before any other.
Inconceivable!
Vizzini's use of inconceivable is a linguistic joke.
Inconceivable!
Utilizing what is called a malapropism. This is when someone uses an incorrect word because it sounds similar to the correct one. It's a far more common occurrence than you might expect.
I hope they now go and take a look at the oranges, the beginnings.
We understand the importance of having the bondage between the parent and the child.
I would ask that your answers be as cryptic and as brief as possible.
I want to applaud Chairman Young's effort to boost funding for T3.
When the history of this administration is written, at least there's an authoritarian voice.
Malapropisms are ubiquitous. We all have those words and phrases that we think we are using correctly, until one day we find out that we actually never did. Like mute point instead of moot point, or beck and call instead of beck and call, self-depreciating instead of self-deprecating, for all intensive purposes rather than for all intents and purposes. Or perhaps the particularly pernicious irregardless, which isn't even a substituted word but a perverse combination of two words, regardless and irrespective, which both mean the same thing and yet are somehow combined to create a third word which simply doesn't exist. So the question is, why is this a malapropism?
That would be inconceivable.
And can you easily explain why? I would venture to say that the subtlety is kind of what makes it a genius joke. So minute is the error that it even has to be pointed out to the audience.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Which gives William Goldman, the writer, an opportunity to slide in a second joke on top of it, when the man who corrects Vizzini isn't even a native English speaker. But then again, neither is Vizzini. He's meant to be from Sicily, so let's not dive too deep into that.
Never go in against a Sicilian when death is on the line!
It's hard to know exactly what word Vizzini thinks he's using, but it's probably unbelievable. And if that is what he's going for, what's actually the difference? Unbelievable has a literal definition, something that cannot be believed to be true. It also has an emphatic definition, something which is simply so extraordinary that it is difficult to believe. This is an example of something called semantic broadening. Inconceivable, however, only has one literal definition, something which is not able to be imagined or thought of. At first, they sound relatively interchangeable, but there is a difference. We can illustrate it through the use of wine in the Battle of Wits. The outcome that we see in the movie is that both goblets of wine are poisoned, and Wesley has simply built up an immunity to the poison. This is unbelievable, because Vizzini might not believe it, but nevertheless it is logical and physically possible. So whether or not he believes it has no bearing on whether it can happen. Contrast this with an alternate outcome. Let's say that both cups are poisoned, but at the same time, neither are poisoned. This is completely contradictory and makes no logical sense. It's impossible to conceive of how the poison can both exist and not exist in the same wine at the same time. So this is therefore inconceivable. Inconceivable is describing the impossible, while unbelievable is referring to the improbable. So something like a 5-sided square, or 2 + 2 = 5. It's impossible to conceive of how any of these could be true. When Vizzini says inconceivable, he's always describing something that has just happened, and therefore is by definition conceivable. But the joke works on two levels. It shows that Vizzini is nothing like the intellectual titan he pretends to be.
Truly, you have a dizzying intellect.
Wait till I get going!
Instead, he is a classic archetype, known as the Miles Gloriosus, named after the Titus Plautus play of the same name. The play features a boastful soldier who is arrogant and vain, and ultimately shown to be a fool and a coward, who is outwitted by his servants and lovers. Through the years, this archetype has been reused many times, most notably by Shakespeare in the form of characters like Dogberry, who either use malapropisms regularly.
Our words, sir, have indeed comprehended 2 auspicious persons. I humbly give you leave to depart.
Or pretend to understand the meanings of words when they don't.
You are tedious. pleases your worship to say so.
See, in Shakespeare's plays, the key to power is intelligence, and exposing it as a mirage therefore becomes not just a funny interaction, but also a commentary on pseudo-intellectualism. Fancy word usage is not a substitute for intelligence, as we know, but there's also an ulterior lesson we can absorb from Vizzini about hubris. Although he may whet our appetite for ridicule, it's important not to start chomping at the bit to make fun of him. Let's take a step back. And if it's piqued your interest as to why I'm writing this on screen, it's because ulterior is actually spelled with a U and means hidden. A person doesn't whet their appetite with a drink, they whet their appetite, meaning to sharpen it. Chomping at the bit is actually champing at the bit, a biting phenomena exhibited by racehorses. And you don't pique your interest, you pique it, meaning to irritate or stimulate. But of course, you already knew all of those, right? You're the sort of person who just wants to get down to brass tacks. Sorry, that's T-A-C-K-S, as in brass thumbtacks. The point is, a trip down Malapropism lane is as humbling as it is educational. We all suffer from improper linguistic training, to some degree or another. The real flaw in Vizzini's character is his arrogance.
Have you ever heard of Plato, Aristotle, Socrates?
Yes?
Morons.
Assuming that everything he says is always correct.
You're sure nobody's follow us?
As I told you, it would be absolutely, totally, and in all other ways, inconceivable.
And therein lies the secondary meaning behind his usage of inconceivable. By describing unbelievable events as inconceivable, he is essentially stating that any act that defies him is not just surprising or unlikely, but it's literally impossible.
Probably some local fisherman out for a pleasure cruise at night through eel-infested waters.
He lives in a kind of alternate reality where everything he does is always right, and everything anyone else does is always wrong. Not just as a matter of course, but as a matter of physics. This state of delusion then catches up to him during the lethal Battle of Wits.
You only think I guessed wrong. That's what's so funny.
But funnily enough, even when he does die, his mind doesn't even seem to believe it. It's almost as if, for a moment, he's both alive and dead at the same time, which I suppose would make his death inconceivable. Thank you for watching. Hit the notification, like, and subscribe if you feel so inclined, and we'll talk again soon.